My name is Richard Dowden. I'm director of the Royal African Society and was a journalist for some time, wandering around Africa. Congo, lifting the curse. Interesting, just looking at that film. I think the bit that it missed out for me was the fact that most Congolese are very proud to be Congolese and frustrated that their country isn't what it should be. But they do produce some of the best music in the world, and they remain cynically cheerful even in the worst of times. I've certainly enjoyed my visits there simply because when you look at the facts and figures, they're depressing, but the Congolese themselves never seem to give up hope. So we're here tonight to talk about a particular aspect of Congo, which is its great mineral wealth, the scandal of riches, as it was once described. And unfortunately, Musson Kodi, who is going to be our Congolese representative, cannot be with us tonight, which leaves us with Katie Clement, who is the former International Crisis Group representative for Central Africa, on my right, and Tricia Feeney, the Executive Director for Rights and Accountability in Development, known as RAID. I think we'll begin by just trying to update the politics of Congo, because essentially it is a political problem. This great, massive heart of Africa has never, ever settled since its independence, and then you look at its pre-independence history and you can understand why. One of the things that really struck me traveling around Congo was that Mobutu made sure the country never had any roads. And there is a story, it's possibly apocryphal, but I think it's worth repeating, that when the genocide happened in Rwanda, Habyarimana had come to, well, not when the genocide, when the war started, when it was invaded by the RPF, Habyarimana went to see Mobutu, and incidentally, he was one of the people actually on the network. There was a radio network where Mobutu could call up all the capitals. He could call Lubumbashi, Goma, Bukavu, Kisangani, but there were 6 of them. The 7th was actually Kigali. So he was in direct radio communication with Habyarimana. Rwanda at that time was more like a province of Congo. But he told, when Habyarimana complained to Mobutu about this invasion from Uganda, Mobutu said, "I told you not to build roads." And it may not be true from Rwanda, but it was certainly true. There were no roads linking that. There are no roads linking the country together. It is not a nation state as in any meaning of the word that we would understand. But Mobutu's overthrow, I think, really opened up this terrible conflict, particularly in the east, and after the war, which overthrew Mobutu, and then when the Rwandans and Ugandans tried their luck a second time and invaded from the east, this time doing it by air, flying right across Congo, and then Angola, Zimbabwe, Namibia, and other countries weighed in on Kabila's side to defend him, and this big war started. It really looked as though this country was just going to be torn to pieces like a carcass. But after a few years of that, there was indeed peace. But the price of peace was that everybody got something to eat. And everybody who had had a part in that war got a job at the top table. So in a way, the eating continued. It was more polite, but the carcass was still divided up. And perhaps mainly under the pressure from the rest of the world, an election, so we can have a government we can deal with, was organized. And as we know, Kabila won that election. What was then supposed to be a loyal opposition, it didn't work, and Mr. Bemba had to flee to Portugal, where he now lives. The core of it is that Kabila is in on a vote from the east and the southeast. He's very unpopular in and around the capital, and it's very difficult to rule a country if you're not popular in your own capital. So much of Congo now is at peace, but the one problem is in the east. And I'll ask Katie Clement to tell us why the war has persisted in the east.
Thank you, Richard. Thanks a lot for inviting me here. Just also, so you know, and I expect you might have some nasty questions for me afterwards. I was also formerly, until a few weeks ago, on the group of experts for the UN Security Council working on the arms embargo on the DRC. Now, why would the war continue in the east? I guess first issue is that it's the war started in the east much sooner than in the rest of the country, and it was essentially a war over land. It's something that exists in the entire region. You have in the entire lakes region, if you want, whereby you've had trouble in Burundi, in Rwanda, you've had ethnic cleansing, you've had a genocide. But most of this war, I think, was triggered by land. Now, most of the people in the east of the country, in North and South Kivu, don't own their land. There is a system of métayage, whereby you actually, to explain to you in a nutshell how it works, actually 75 to perhaps 80% of the population rent a little plot of land, and they just rent it for a season. And then to pay for that plot of land, you work for 1 or 2 days in the plantation owner's plantation for him. So if you get sick, then you can't work on the plantation, and you get thrown out. So you can see how precarious this is. And this only lasts for about 6 months, and then you can be kicked out every 6 months if you want. So every plantation season. Now, so the land issue. First, it's very precarious. Secondly, it becomes even worse because you have a huge population density. This was the case in Rwanda and Burundi, and this is again the case in eastern Congo. Population density is huge. When you go to the villages, the amount of kids you see in the villages today is still amazing. I asked the Mwami of Rutshuru one day, which is the traditional leader of Rutshuru in North Kivu. So what are you going to do with all these children? And because you have such a land issue now, and now there's going to be more and more people. He said, well, that's not a problem. We'll just move elsewhere. But the land elsewhere belongs to someone else, And so the land issue, very high population density. On top of that, you add another layer, which is, of course, the riches of this area, the incredible wealth you have in the land of that area. Coltan, cassiterite, tin prices are extremely high at the moment. Cassiterite is the mineral used to make tin. So that fuels war. I'm not saying it's the cause of war, but when it gives you money to continue fighting. And then, I guess, you have the history of this region. As I said, you've had ethnic cleansing in Burundi that kind of triggered into a genocide in Rwanda, that you had further ethnic fighting in the east of the Congo. So you have a history in the entire region, and in the mind of the actors, it's all linked. Of course, they just walk across the border. And so it's the same actors that you find in the different countries. Traditionally, when you will speak to a rebel fighter, he will tell you, this is what I was told, Oh yeah, but you know, we have the Tutsis from Ethiopia who come here. I said, hang on, which Tutsis from Ethiopia? So the Amharic from Ethiopia are Tutsis. That's the way they read it. So you have to understand it as they read it as a regional strife themselves. That's what I was told. So land, history, population density, and final huge issue is because of this war and this insecurity which has been prevalent for a long time, there's a real absence of state authority. At this moment you have this vacuum. Now, for instance, in Ituri, which is just north of North Kivu, at the moment they have demobilized most of the armed groups. But one of the major issues is that they haven't been replacing. It creates a vacuum, and it hasn't been replaced. So the big challenge now is to put something else in place. Otherwise, the conditions, which are land, population density, resources, are still there, and you have the risk that if you don't replace this by something else, it's going to fuel again another conflict, and the militias are going to start to rearm. I guess I'll stop there.
We have another member of the panel who's not actually here at the moment. He's Alois Tegera, director of the Pole Institute in Goma. We have our audience here, and we'd like you to tell us what role the minerals, the resources of the area are playing in the conflict that's going on around you in Kivu.
Thanks, Richard. I think the role of natural resources played positive role or negative role in the DRC crisis could be summarized in 7 points. The first one, a short glimpse on the weight of minerals in the DRC economy speaks for itself. For instance, Katanga copper represented 60% of state revenues until the economic slump beginning in the early 1980s. Kasai Industrial Diamond is one of the biggest reserves in the world. Up to 700 tons of gold are presently estimated in Ituri, around the sites of Mongwalu and Watsa. 80% of world coltan reserves are said to be found in the Kivus. One of the biggest world reserve of cassiterite are located in Walikale territory in northern Kivu. Numbing reserve, said to be among the most important in the world, is located in Rutshuru territory in northern Kivu province. Transborder shared resources like oil in the Albert Lake and in the Sami gas in the Lake Kivu represent important reserves still to be exploited. With this glimpse, you can see how minerals do have real weight in the DRC economy. The second point is that minerals are still attracting old and new investors. The current battle around the renegotiation of mine contracts involves old multinationals such as Forest Group in Katanga, but also newcomers such as South African company MPC, controlled by the Virgin Island-based Eden Mining, battling hard to secure for themselves the cassiterite reserves in Walikale territory in a fierce contest with the local artisanal mining cooperatives. The high expressed interest of Asian countries like China and India in DRC mineral reserves and the competition around mineral concessions is a sign that the DRC is still a battleground for competing interests. DRC is far from changing its original status, that of a liberal free market for all. However, a shift is being made away from mining sector to focus more on the hydro potential of the Congo River and its capacity to produce electrical energy. Unfortunately, the power produced is going to be for a prominent African hub of economic development like South Africa or Egypt, and less concerned with local DRC urban and rural needs in energy. In the Kivus, traditional agricultural interest in the mining sector was highlighted during the two rebellions of IFDA of Laurent Kabila and the RCD Goma, especially with the concern boom on international markets around 2000. Most of the output was artisanal mined to fund the rebellion. The trade around minerals during the rebellion time created a new class of middlemen well connected with international companies like Belgian Tradibet or German Stark, to give an example. This middle class is currently running contours of cassiterite, gold, diamond, copper, and the other minerals around the country and in competition with traditional heavyweight internationals. So the fight around the mining contracts is also today a contest between internationals and local stakeholders. For instance, in 2006, to give an example, 2/3 of exports from Goma were minerals. The two rebellions have demonstrated how weak militarily and politically is DRC, and foreign armies involved in the two rebellions, whether on government or rebel side, are tempted to deal with a weak DRC rather than a strong one. However, the internal weakness of DRC to come up with a strong and transparent bureaucracy to regulate the mining sector and investors of all kinds represents the biggest problem of DRC. Arguments about the DRC natural resources entertaining wars should first consider what capacity or incapacity the DRC government has to respond to the challenges it faces instead of viewing the country as a simple victim of foreign interests. None of the looting going on could take place in DRC without the collaboration of local business community and state services. Lastly, the troubled eastern DRC, whether in Ituri, Katanga, or in the Kivus, are to be seen less in terms of conflict around resources such as land or minerals only, but also in terms of exclusion of sections of the local population. This is true about the Banyarwanda speaking in the Kivus, but also the Kasai people in the Katanga. These local and internal components of DRC crisis should be taken into consideration for a better analysis and understanding of the role natural resources play in DRC prolonged crisis. This is what I want to put forward. This question you asked me.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. That's very clear. Were the resources in this area ever used for the benefit of local people? Because when you say local players, I think of people who happen to live there and suddenly discover under their cassava patch there is something valuable, so they want to use it, and I feel very sympathetic to them for doing that. But it doesn't sound as though when you talk about local players, you're talking about ordinary poor people who've discovered a diamond under there. You're talking about something quite different. I mean, that you're talking about local warlords who are using this to gain power and actually oppress local people.
Well, this is one thing you can say. Since maybe the two rebellions and maybe the Jacobin, the other companies who are doing mining, it has become clear that most of the outputs in minerals are done by artisanal mining. And of course, they have got their own kind of related problems because an artisanal miner goes in the pit in the morning, comes out with some kind of mineral worth maybe, I don't know, $10 to $20, and the kind of market around them where they burn or they earn a day. So this is an internal problem. But yet you have to recognize that most of the output in the mineral sector over the last 15 years have been done by local people artisanally. So there is a kind of much money going in that kind of cycle. Of course, the biggest people who profit from this are middlemen who can make the shifting of minerals from remote area by plane like Walikale to Goma and then export them to international markets. These are the ones who make, of course, the biggest money out of this.
Is that because? Alois, is that because the local people don't know the real price of what they have, or because they know the real price but they don't have the power to negotiate?
No, I think today, whether even a trader who is in a remote place of Ituri and Masisi and Walikale, they all know from mobile phone or from internet, they know really the real price in London market, so they know that. But I think we have also to differentiate those who are really maybe at the losing side, like the traders, who really cannot do much about saving what they earn in a day. And I think this is part of our hobby today, to try to see how we can kind of saving schemes for these people so that at least they can burn $3 and save $7. But this is a difficult task to make. But at the same time, I think there is a whole, if you can see like a town like Goma and see how much activity is going on and how many buildings are going up and how many kinds of people being also bringing in goods from what they have exported in the minerals. So there is a lot of activity there. And to be honest with you, I have to tell you that 2/3 of the Northern Kivu revenues today are from the minerals.
So there is some benefit coming through.
Yeah, there is.
Okay, all right.
But we have, having said that, we have to be clear that also the population at large do get very little small dividends from these minerals. Of course, that's clear, and I think that's the culture of DRC mineral riches, because of course those who are better placed, those who can have better connection internationally and locally are the ones who earn more from that. But we have to say that dividends from the minerals are badly shared in the sense that also the state services who are supposed to collect taxes from all these comptoirs and all these middlemen doing the business around the minerals, of course the state services don't do it. And if when they do it, it profits them and doesn't profit the population, because the entire system of redistributing the revenues from the provinces or from the national or at the national level is still very poor and almost next to nothing.
Well, so the state itself is getting nothing from this. It's just individuals.
Yeah, the state doesn't get little, but the state people, assuming the role of the state, are the ones who benefit a lot from this.
Yeah. Okay. Tricia, is there anything you'd like to ask Alois?
No, I mean, I'm very impressed with his presentation of such a complex pattern, and I think I recognize a lot of what he's saying, but I know more about the situation in Katanga, where you're dealing with an urbanized, quite sophisticated population that's had an industrialized past and may have an industrialized future. And in a way, the situation of artisanal mining came somewhat later, I think, to Katanga than to the Kivus. And I think it's creating a different kind of problem, although a very serious one that I think Alois has alluded to, and that's the enormous sort of social tensions now, because as the Congolese government, for whatever reasons, wants to promote large-scale industrialized mining again, particularly in Katanga. And that was always the view of the World Bank and everyone, that would be the springboard to development. You could create a bridgehead in Katanga. I remember being told this in 2002 by the World Bank. Something went wrong with their theory. And the failure of that industrialized program, the failure of the restructuring, the failure, I mean, what does, perhaps a country in war with very weak or non-existent structures and institutions, does it need a new mining code? Do you think perhaps that's the last thing on your list of priorities? And yet, in the midst of the war, or while the war was still raging, 2001, 2002, you get the World Bank coming in with its experts and a draft new mining code. And hey, and suddenly all these mining companies, the so-called, risk takers, are clamoring and demanding the dismemberment of Gécamine. That was clearly the discussions that were had in November in the run-up to the new mining code. And this, I think you could say it was premature, even if there was going to be state pillage. Maintaining that decaying structure was probably less costly and more cost-effective than dismantling it in the way that happened. So I think there's a lot of problems with the way the donors and the World Bank intervened that have exacerbated the problems that Alois has described.
Katie, would you like to ask Alois any questions?
Hi, Alois. I went into your office about, I think, a month and a half ago, and I'm still very much looking forward to this bit of research you did. And I think maybe for the audience here in London, that might be interesting as well. The Poly Institute in Alois did research on the mining area in Walikale, and potentially the link also between the mines there and armed groups. Would you have specific stories maybe to tell us on this case that would kind of make it real for the audience here, and that what were your major findings of that research?
Well, thanks, Katie. I think the mining in Walikale has become really what we can also call about the eastern far west of the northern Kivu province. Because presently, today, the entire territory of Walikale, which is bigger than Masisi and Richu put together, is the biggest territory we have, and which has got one of these biggest reserve of cassiterite, is controlled by Colonel Sandi, who is the commander brigade of the 85 brigade, and also our research has come to find out that he works in close relationship with the Rwandan FDLR military people who control and occupy that territory. So this is a kind of situation which is very hard indeed, because we are aware now that most of the cassiterite being exported from Goma, part of it is really cassiterite which has been also dug and sold by FDLR people. And how do they use these proceeds? How do they use the money they get? And of course, the idea that also part of the money used to buy arms so that they can entrench themselves in this territory is somehow kind of an idea which is quite dazzling and quite worrying. Yeah.
Is it true then that Uganda and Rwanda are benefiting more from these minerals than Congo is?
Well, listen, there are two ways of seeing this. In our research, we have come to realize that neighboring countries like Uganda and Rwanda do have very little taxes on exports. And this encourages some of the middlemen to export from either Uganda or from Rwanda. But this is to be blamed on the Congolese services and state policy, which also wants every time to raise up taxes, etc., and make life impossible for the business community. So this really shouldn't be seen as necessarily a fault of Ugandans or Rwandans profiting from it. It is because their countries have got better policies for export and encourage business people, and this is something we don't have in Congo.
That's very interesting.
Good evening, Alois. It's Nicholas Garrett. I'm a director of the company Resource Consulting Services, and we actually met in Goma last year. It's Nicholas Garrett here. We met last year in Goma. I've just finished an investigative report for the World Bank on the Bisia mine, which is the largest, Congo's largest tin mine in Walikale territory, and the mine you were referring to earlier that is currently controlled by the FARDC's 85th Brigade. In a separate piece for the Financial Times, I have with my colleague Harrison Mitchell traced the minerals from that mine to some of the largest electronics groups on the high street, which is basically Microsoft and Sony and various others. My question to you is, what do you think from the local perspective, what should these large electronics groups contribute to the DRC's reform process, and how can they support any of the reform processes that are currently taking place in North Kivu in particular? Thank you.
Our institute maybe has always been fighting something which we have to understand. But we have to face the fact that although
Hold on. Okay.
Natural resources somehow better used can profit to better the lives of the people. And this is one thing we have really to see how it can be done. So for me, saying that, okay, high-tech, capitalist being contributing to high-tech, what can you do to bring peace here? It's as if we consider that now we have wars because it's capitalized. That's not the full picture of the situation here. Capitalized, which is in the Kivus, and the Kivu has got the biggest reserve, was not even really mined until recently after 2000. So, which means really the problem we have less to do with mining as such. They have also to do with internal components of the crisis, which is bad governance and also the incapacity of the country to come up with a proper leadership which can deal with such questions like internal exclusion between populations, which is happening, which is part of the biggest problem we have to face.
So
how is it that... No, sorry, probably I should stop there.
Yeah, no, okay. No, so we shouldn't boycott or stop buying this equipment here simply because it comes from the war zone of Eastern Congo.
But listen, the problem of boycott is always, when you boycott, as I said, 2/3 of the province, the northern Kivu province, 2/3 of their revenue is from minerals. So if you boycott, what do you put into place? Are you not likely to do more harm than good?
It's a long. That's a very big question, which we've struggled with over the years. But I think certainly people should know where their minerals come from, where their goods come from. and at least be aware of it.
Richard, I think there is a kind of most initiatives being done. For instance, the Germans are working very hard to have, for instance, the coltan certified from this region in Rwanda and the DRC. Any effort in that sense, where there can be much more certification of what is being exploited here in the region, is going to help, and also is going to put more transparency in what is being done, and also all those who are involved in this commerce will feel much better to know that the goods they buy is certified and they can trace them.
Okay, thanks. We have another questioner for you. Just a moment.
Hello, Alois. My name is Marie-Claire. I'm from the platform of Congolese women in the UK, and we network a lot with women in the DRC. And I agree with the point that you raised about the problem in the Congo, but unfortunately you haven't raised the problem of gun and the traffic of gun in that area. I think there's a UN report which has a UN expert report, I think in 2005, which actually linked the illicit traffic of guns and illicit traffic of natural resources. And the gun plays really a huge problem in the control of those mines, because most of those miners are under the control of people with guns. So I think it would be quite important to mention that as one of the biggest problems. And also, you talk about exclusion and tribal groups. And I think you have to look at the dimension of the DRC. It's not only the East, it's a big country with 450 ethnic groups and 250 tribal. So this is being used to really justify the illicit exploitation of natural resources in the DRC, as such as this problem of land and problem of ethnic exclusion. And I think also it takes two to tango, and the corruption, the transparency in the DRC with the government. And so we also have to look at all the international actors there who are not transparent also in this conflict and in dealing with the problem in the DRC. Big international organizations such as the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund and all these big donors, and it's important to put them into your picture as well. So thank you.
Now, listen, if I start with the ethnic dimension, I think I tried in the short presentation I was making, try to if we consider that the 1996 rebellion, which started in the Kivus and toppled Mobutu, the underlying root problem was not natural minerals, it was about ethnic exclusion. And also, even today, the different warlords we have in Masisi and the Ruchuru and wherever, and in southern Kivu, their presence in these mountains and their wars they are making to the local army and the national army is not about minerals. It is all about this kind of exclusion, ethnic exclusion, which is an internal problem. So I'd like that maybe as Congolese and as a nation, we should focus more on this ethnic dimension of the conflict, because no one from outside can come and solve this for us. And then see how eventually people can try to have a space of living and expression, and see how we can rebuild the country together. This is something which is internal. But I also don't exclude the big players. And of course, there was one participant who talked about how the World Bank designed the new mineral code, etc. This is true, but also we have to accept a hard fact, which is really hard for Congolese to swallow. Congo has always been seen as a kind of place where people can go and grab what they can get out. This was the original status of this country, and it hasn't changed at all. And multinationals and the big players who have been doing and helping and enabling this role are still doing the same. Look at what is happening today. Like the Congo River debate. Who is going to benefit from the power generated from the Congo River? Not Congolese, but multinationals are going to sell to where they can get more money in South Africa, Egypt, and wherever. So this is a big problem. Yes, I do accept. Yeah. And also the question I had about corruption and transparency is also an internal DRC problem. And I don't know if I am a businessman. Right in front of me, corrupt state services where I can pay less and get more. Of course, as a businessman, I will do that. And this has to be blamed locally to our own state services.
Okay, thank you very much.
My name is Edward Bell. I work for International Alert in London. My question is really with the background of events in the parliament in Kinshasa. What the role of China and the Chinese investment in natural resource sector, infrastructure sector in DRC, what will that change, and what do the people around Alois in Goma, Kivu think about this trend?
I think the Chinese are raising a huge debate within DRC. The parliament has been discussing over the last week about that. And the trouble is the Chinese are coming straight to what has been seen as a kind of a prank carré, as we say in French, of Western multinationals. They are interested in mining, they are interested, but the way it is being done raises some questions. For instance, they say, okay, we would like to get 10 million of copper, and in exchange of this 10 million of copper, we'll give you, I don't know, 3,000 kilometers of roads. But we have to know, are the Chinese going to use local labor, or are they going to do as they usually do, bring their own local people to come and build this road? In that sense, yes, the Congo will be losing out, and this has to be really well studied.
Okay, all right. That's fascinating. I mean, the Chinese tell me that the Africans don't work hard enough. Is this true?
Sir?
The Chinese say, when you ask them why they bring their labor, they say Africans don't work hard enough. Can this be true?
Well, I think it is because it is cheaper for them also to bring all these kind of prisoners, etc., because really they cost nothing, and that's the reason behind.
I think that might be right. Alois, it's wonderful talking to you, and please stay on the line and actually intervene if you feel you want something to say. But I just think we want to broaden this debate out a little bit here, and just see what people feel about what we've heard so far. Katie, have you anything to add at this stage? Do you think that?
There's two questions that I wanted to react on. The first is the question that you were asking is. Why don't artisanal miners get better prices for the minerals that they actually sell? And that kind of relates to your question, Nick, which was about the minerals being, that you actually found in Walikale, going all the way to Microsoft, maybe. If you look at the entire chain, let me just explain to you how it works, maybe just in a nutshell, so everybody understands. Now, there is a few areas in the east. There's Mongwale in Ituri, there is Walikale, essentially in North Kivu, and there's Le Carré Minier in South Kivu. So there's three big areas where you have a high concentration of minerals. You have them a bit dotted all over the east, but these are like three very high concentration areas of minerals. And some of these areas are controlled by the army, which is the national army, which is moving back in there. Some of these areas are controlled by rebels. Now, if you go, for instance, you gave the example, Alois gave the example of Walikale, but you studied it. There is in South Kivu, there is in the Carré Minier, you have a similar case where you have a large mining area, which is for one half more or less controlled by the National Army, for the other half more or less controlled by the FDLR, Rwandan rebel group. And so in that case, the way it happens is that this gets extracted by the local population, and so by artisanal miners. Then you have local buyers who actually buy it. But the key here is that there's only one place where you can transport it from the Carré Minier to Bukavu, to the big comptoirs. There's one way you can do that, and that's basically by airplane. And there is one airfield there. So you can either walk it, carry the cassiterite on your head and walk for a few weeks to Bukavu, but that's not very cost efficient. So the other way is to the big the big comptoirs in Bukavu, charter a plane that goes there essentially twice a week. They fill it up and they go back to Bukavu. A few comptoirs can actually go together and charter a plane together. The local traders then put it inside the plane and it goes to Bukavu. Now what happens by the time it gets to the airport, you have a mix of the cassiterite that comes from the army controlled area and the cassiterite that comes from the FDLR controlled area. Okay, then it goes from there to Bukavu. Now in Bukavu, the comptoir has cassiterite that comes from the Carré Minier, but also from other areas in South Kivu, because they charter to different, locations. So then you have another mix. So then from there on, it kind of usually crosses over the border and works its way all the way up to the west, to the northern hemisphere. Now, the problem is, how do you trace it? How do you know where it's actually coming from? And that's where it's interesting, where the Germans are doing something interesting. About a year ago, most of the countries here in the West said, yes, it's great, we're going to do the certification so we can actually figure out which mine it's coming from, and then we can know whether it's coming from a place that's controlled by the rebels or not. And now, a year down the line, there's only one country left that just signed an agreement with Congo, which is Germany. So this is losing speed and steam a lot. A lot of support here is lacking in the West for this project. Now, this is probably the only way to figure out where this cassiterite is coming from and who it is. Which person gets wealthy from this cassiterite, who profits from it. So this is one of the issues I wanted to raise further on, but just to make you understand how the system actually works, because right now when you go to a comptoir in Bukavu, there's no way of knowing where the cassiterite is coming from. And this is the case for other minerals as well. So what can you do about it in this case is the actual tracing of it. I'll stop there and I'll come back later.
All right.
I'm a bit of an agnostic on the traceability. I mean, it's also being tried with cobalt from Katanga, which has been, smuggled by the wheelbarrow load for the last sort of 10 years or more, most of it ending up in China and then coming back in the sort of processed goods, high-tech goods that Nick was talking about. And I think the German scheme, which I know less about, I think the problem with both of them is that they're hugely expensive. When you think of all the other problems and urgent needs in the Congo, there might be a better way in taking, what Alois is saying about, there are things inside the Congo that need fixing, and, sort of developing and spending more on developing local provincial assemblies, sort of. In Katanga, it's grotesque. You have a very populist governor, and he sometimes thinks he's the president of the Congo, so he banned all the exports of cobalt, raw, unprocessed cobalt, And suddenly it all stopped, and it was all getting stockpiled up in Likasi, and the Chinese traders, of course, it has those knock-on effects. The creuseurs, the artisanal miners weren't happy because, of course, they're starving if they can't get the stuff out. But I'm not convinced. I mean, it seems to me that we had a similar problem when Patrick, who's there, was on the UN panel of 2002, 2003. And it was that lack of political will. That you could find a less complex way, I'm sure, of dealing with some of the illegal exports of some of the commodities. And we know that Congo's got such a wealth that the commodity is always going to change. So we might suddenly, have the most brilliant system for tracing cobalt, and then, the market will switch and everybody will be after wolframite or something. So I think it's a kind of high-tech way of masking the fact of the absence of political will. And the reason is because these are strategic minerals that our high-tech industries in the West and in China really want. And but there's a bit of kerfuffle when the FT runs a story or the NGOs say don't buy mobiles. Of course, we're not going to stop buying mobiles or electronic goods. Or they'll come up with some naff code of conduct, which is being discussed, I think, which we know won't really change things. And I think if there was political will, if we could sort of get more debate going among Congolese politicians, among Congolese civil society, that this is something that has to change, I think we'd be spending all those millions in a more useful and longer-term way than in, helping German or Belgian boffins develop very expensive projects. I mean, the World Bank and I agree on that point, actually.
But can you just remind us just what we're talking about here? I mean, I don't know. Here's my bag. Here it is. Hold on. I mean, if I fill that bag with cassiterite in Goma, how much would I get for it? And how much would I get for the refined product? I mean, maybe Nicholas can come in here and help me. I mean, how much would I get for that same amount on the world market?
Well, I don't know about cassiterite, but a bag full of cobalt. Yes. Yeah, I mean, a pound of cobalt's going at sort of $10 now.
Where?
On the international market, in London Metal Exchange. You would sort of sweat down a kind of narrow little hole that's in danger of collapse all day to maybe, sort of get the ore kind of out and to fill that bag. Back-breaking work, having to use sort of children to go through these little tunnels, and then, women, spectre thin, washing it before it's sort of bagged up and sold through the middlemen to the outside world. So a bag like that you could do quite nicely, selling it to the right people in Brussels or London. But you would sweat from dawn till dusk to get maybe $1 a day in Katanga.
So it's but once it arrives it's
it's
how much
bonanza.
Is it worth then? It's how much is it? Do you think?
Well, a kilogram of cassiterite is currently the trade is undertaken in tons. So for a ton of refined tin, you would get $19,000 around about on the London Metal Exchange.
$19,000, right?
And the minerals, the cassiterite in the kibus, has normally at the export stage a tin content of about 62%. So you'd still get around 11,000. My math's correct.
Okay. So when it travels, it gets a lot more expensive. Okay. All right. Thanks. Yes.
Yeah, I just in response to something you.
Hold on. Wait for the microphone.
Hi,
sorry.
Hi.
Can you introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Mary Sohn, and I'm from Film Aid, which isn't related to Congo, but I just wanted to ask you a question about what you were saying about moving the ore and the minerals around. Is nobody helping them to actually refine it themselves, so that therefore when they transport it, it's already refined and it's worth 19,000? Why are they not going straight to that, so that the country has refined minerals.
Okay. Who'd like to pick that up?
Well, I mean, that is coming back because, I mean, obviously Congo in, the late 80s was refining its copper and, cobalt was just thrown away as they didn't think it mattered. So they've got huge, sort of slag heaps full of cobalt, which others are sort of benefiting from. But there is more of an insistence now that there should be value added inside the country, and so you can see a lot of processing. But of course, in some ways, that's creating other problems when it's very small scale and everybody's setting up little furnaces in residential areas and, poisoning the local population. So that's not the ideal, but, a more rational processing. You can see the moves. I mean, I think the East, again, is a bit different because of the war and the ongoing conflict.
At this stage, can I bring... Yeah, Alois, yes, are you still with us? Great. Okay, yep.
Yeah, but I would like to just say that to have a value added to the local production, really, one of the biggest problems we have, whether it was, or maybe inside the Congo, because now it is cared for, is energy. There's no way you can add value to the capital rights from what you carry here locally, because the processing needs a lot of energy, and the energy which is missing badly here. So if you want really to try to work towards giving added value to local minerals in the kingdoms, we have also to raise the whole question: how do we see the energy deficit, which is really very bad in this area?
You simply can't. You simply don't have the electrical power to process these minerals in Goma.
No, we don't.
Okay.
There was this order which came. Actually, it was a kind of ministerial decision which obliged most of the people exporting cassette from Goma to process it, so that they didn't allow them to export it without being processed, so that at least 25% of rubbish can stay here. But most of them are using generators. But if you are a businessman and you are using a generator to process a don't know how many tons of cassiterite, how competitive are you going to be on the international market?
Yeah. Okay. Can I, at this stage, can I just bring in Lizzie Parsons, who works for Global Witness? We have one or two experts in the audience. Lizzie.
Okay, thanks. Well, I wanted to raise a couple of issues. First, relating to the mining sector, following on from what the others have said, and then to secondly talk about another natural resource in DRC, which is hugely important for different reasons, but is often forgotten in the wider debate about natural resource management in DRC, and that's the forests of Congo. But firstly, just relating to the mining sector, and particularly linking to what's been talked about of certification and the push towards getting army control of areas or state control. And really the question is, what is legal and illegal in the context of DRC, where you have an army who are becoming swiftly the chief human rights abusers in the country. And that's certainly been the case of the mining sector as well. As Katie was saying, you have a sort of political vacuum in many areas, but the problem is when the army then comes in, they certainly do not act for the benefit of the wider population, and have been seen to continue the activities of the militia in taking advantage financially of the minerals, and certainly not channeling those finances to the state and to the wider benefit of the people. So I think we need to question the issue of legality and illegality. And that's been the case, that's been documented in the Kivu certainly, but also we conducted research on the informal or artisanal timber sector in Ituri just over a year ago, and we saw there the same pattern, that whilst some of the timber trade from that district had been controlled by militia, The army then came in after a demobilization program that MONUC had strongly supported, but unfortunately the army were continuing as previously, heavily engaged in the timber sector, but certainly not channeling those very much needed revenues to benefit the people, but pocketing the money themselves at various stages along the chain from the forest to lax border controls and so forth. So I think that's one main headline from me. And then secondly, looking at the timber sector more generally in DRC, in terms of financial revenue flows, it's certainly not as important as perhaps the copper sector down in Katanga, but it is vital for or necessary for 40 million people in DRC, which is about 2/3 of the population. Some needing it, pygmy groups living in the forest, it's utterly vital to their way of life. But to others, it's necessary for the charcoal they need to cook with, for the timber needs to build their homes and so forth. But at the moment, parallel to the mining sector being sort of ramped up by the bank and other donors in sort of a post-transition period, there's also been very strong moves by the donor community to try and ramp up the industrial scale logging sector, which we've seen in other countries, Cameroon, Cambodia, is not a good model for development. It leads to the destruction of the forest environment, which again means that local people who rely on the forest no longer have that for their well-being. And also now on the international scale, we're looking at climate change and the need of forests to and the need for forests to stay standing to lessen or moderate somehow climate change. And so there are international moves to try and keep the forest standing in DRC. At the same time, there are signs that won't happen, that there are companies from China, again, India and other places just ready to take up new concessions once the current review process of timber titles at the moment that's ongoing, that's being reviewed, but there are certainly buyers and people who are wanting to ramp up the industrial scale logging sector there. And so, there's a great risk of the forests once again being cut down, and I think that's one thing that we need to flag and is often forgotten. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Other questions now? Yes, at the back there.
Hi, I'm Pascal Hart, I'm a journalist. I'd like to ask more about the link between the resources and the violence, particularly in the East. The last time I was in Goma, it seemed that people's general perception was very much that without the control of the natural resources, the FDLR and Laurent Nkunda could not be waging this continual war against the ordinary population. People were always saying, Rwanda sends guns in and takes minerals out. I want to know, is that true? Yeah. For those of you that don't, do you want to just say the front, what is it? The Democratic Front for the Liberation of Rwanda, which is thought to be the former génocidaire, certainly founded by the people who created the genocide in Rwanda, now living in Eastern Congo. Very young children who left Rwanda because they were Hutus, but they were too young to have taken part in the genocide, and who now can't go back to Rwanda.
Yeah, and okay, Katie.
This is exactly what we were trying to look at, and partly as in the panel, on the expert panel on the DRC. Just to explain to you also in a nutshell, there have been two different UN panels or group of experts working on the DRC. The first one was working essentially on natural resources and largely known as the CASEM panel. The second group is a group working on the arms embargo, and its mandate has been extended or expanded and then somewhat reduced as of recently, but part of its mandate is also looking at the means of survival of armed groups, and that would entail, of course, the use of natural resources. Now, I belonged to the second group until a few weeks ago. What we've been looking at, yes, in terms of control of natural resources, the two main groups, the way they operate is that there's two large groups, which are FDLR, former Hutu, former Rwandan Hutus. Now some may choose to stay in Congo, some may be Congolese, and some may want to come back. But opposition rebellion to the regime in Rwanda. And the second group, Laurent Nkunda, was essentially, not exclusively, but largely in its command structure, particularly Tutsi-based, although not in its fighters. In terms of the control of resources, the CNDP, which is Laurent Nkunda's group, controls the border area, in a strategic area which is a border between Rwanda, Uganda, and Congo, Bunagana. It's a big border crossing, and I was there, in fact, about a month and a half ago. And sitting in that area at the border crossing, I saw lots of trucks coming in. Some were opened and some not. So you basically, anything can come in, okay? And the other way around, it's the same story. I was not going to go and open the trucks because there was lots of fighters around me, and I'm happy to be here. But you can draw the conclusion that you want. So it is entirely possible to bring lots of things in and out, and these are big trucks coming in and out. The second issue is that in terms of control of natural resources, for instance, in Walikale, you have a fighting over a former militia belonging to Colonel Sami, which has now become part of the Congolese army, but has not been integrated, has not been brassaged with, basically merged with other groups, and it's basically the same group, just with a different uniform and a different hat on. Now, they still largely control the central mining area. And around it, you have the FDLR, who control all the areas that are also resource-rich. And so it's basically exactly what I was telling you for South Kivu, where you have this merge of, some areas controlled by rebel groups, some other areas controlled by army. You have exactly the same in that place. So yes, they do certainly benefit from it. I think many NGOs and local institutes have documented that. Do they buy guns with it? Well, I don't have the proof, but clearly they keep on using, they keep on waging war. So yeah, you have bullets coming from somewhere. Guns, AK-47 last very long. I've taken pictures of AK-47s which were built in 1956. But so if you take good care of it, that's it will last you a really long time. But bullets, of course, need to be replaced. Now, they certainly that money must be used for buying bullets. Of course, it will be. In terms of natural resources, you have the use of cassiterite. You have the use of timber. You have gold, you have many other resources that are being used. Certainly, they both benefit from it. Now, it has to be said that probably Laurent Nkunda controls less of a resource-rich area, and much of the fighting that is going on at this stage, or the violation of the ceasefire, are fighting right on the border area where you start having mines. So it might also be fighting for the control over some of these mines.
Great. We're getting rather technical at this stage, but I just want to bring in Lydia Gomersall at this moment, who's the head of communications and media at the International Rescue Committee, which since more than 10 years now has been doing reports on the human cost of all of this, by doing mortality surveys and health surveys in the area. So just briefly, because we are running out of time, please just remind us what the human cost of all these rather technical things about minerals and the economy. What is the impact on it in the local context?
I will be very brief because, as I say, my expertise on the mining issues is absolutely zero. But we've done 5 mortality surveys. The last one was launched in January this year. And
in this area?
This one is the last one was all over the Congo.
All over Congo, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And had some slightly complicated results in the east because it started to show a dip in figures, and then, of course, with the renewed violence, a slight up. But the figure is the one that was up on the film there. 5.4 million people died as a result of some people say it's the conflict. It's certainly not people killed by machetes. It's people killed by, people who've died as a result of a total lack of infrastructure in the country. So it's directly related to the conflict, but is much broader than that. And the 5.4 million, by the way, again is slightly complicated, but it's 5.4 million people in excess of the average sub-Saharan mortality rate. So it's a very big figure indeed. But I just wanted to quickly add, supporting what you've said, I got Congo under my skin in just one visit. But going to Bukavu and seeing people there, and most of our work is not, we do basic healthcare provision, but we're also very much involved in community-driven reconstruction in the East, which seems to be the way forward, to give people the power to rebuild their own lives, to take control of their own communities. And one very it's probably a very naive reaction, but I have never in my entire life had a feminist thought, ever. But going to Eastern Congo and seeing the women and their strength in spite of the unbelievably awful things that happened to them. One woman was sitting in a village committee that we were helping them to create for themselves. And I said, I'm going back to London. What is it that we can do to help you here? And she looked me straight in the eye and she said, you help us keep the peace, we'll do the rest. And I've never forgotten it.
Thank you very much. Now, we really do have to wrap up, but no Congolese meeting in London would be complete without a question from Antoine. But please, Antoine, please, 1 minute.
They're not a
yes,
exactly.
I'll tell you.
All right. This is not a question. I just want to give you fresh news.
All right. Okay,
from
please.
what you have spoken. First of all, Alois, now Nkunda's chief of staff is wanted by the International Criminal Court. Why is not handing him over? Because he fears that he himself will go the same way, and then we will find out the link between him and Kagame. So for Alois to say that Banyarwanda are excluded, I don't agree with that. They are the problem in Eastern Congo. That's one. The second point is about what Patricia Finney said, and I'm very glad to see you again. You put up a lot of work to find out what British multinational company, how they have been involved in supporting the Rwandan and the Ugandan to invade Congo. What success or failure have you made? And then the next thing is about the concentrate, what you talked about. Right this week, the governor of Katanga has banned more export, because what we ask the mining companies is you can export concentrate but not mineral when they are raw. But what they do now, they just keep on doing it. And so corruption is not just a Congolese problem, it's also international. And the Belgian representative at the UN has just resigned because he has interest with the George Forest.
Tell me about it.
Yeah, you see, corruption is everywhere. And about what Lizzie said is very, very important too. We have no army, Lizzie. You take all these people who have been raping yesterday, you put them together today, and you call that army? No, and that's why this is going on and on and on. And my own family was a victim of that, I told you. And it's very, very difficult. But the last point I want to make is that because of the crunch here and in America, we don't want the internationalization of Congo's wealth. The wealth of Congo belongs to Congolese first. That's the point I want to make. And whether China or Europe, if they want to come, we want a fair deal. We need infrastructure. Let's see this deal with China. Let's see how it will work. But Freeport-McMoran, an American company, has got the biggest cake in Tenke Fungurume. The Congolese government has only 5% stake, and Jekamin, Congo state-owned company, 12%. Nobody's criticizing that. We are only looking at what China is doing coming in, you know? So we have to be fair and say that the West is still looting. The Belgians are still considering Congo as their colony, and that has to end. At the end of the day, whether the West, China, or anybody, what we need in Congo or in Africa is people to come and share technology with us so we can mine our own natural resources, create jobs. Why not also transform them on the spots? That's a long-term vision I have, but that's the way forward. Otherwise, you will still have more Zimbabwe's, more Congos, and more of this problem in Africa. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Anton. All right, would our two speakers like on the platform like a final word? Or
yeah. Well, he asked me for my list of achievements. It's pretty pathetic. I mean, after, if we were on performance-related pay, any pay, I think of the 20 complaints that we filed against the multinational companies listed in the UN panel's report of 2003, who were accused of breaching the OECD guidelines, which was the only pathetic piece of paper we had to use as a benchmark. In no case was any of them even reprimanded. Many of them were completely exonerated, and in other cases like the US or Germany, the governments just refused to even consider the cases. So you can see this is very big business. It's a very big struggle. But, I don't think it's true to say, Antoine, that the Western companies getting off scot-free and there is no further, questions about 10K. In fact, that's quite a big campaign running now on that.
Okay, thanks. Katie. Yeah.
Yes, I wanted to also follow up on that issue, which is we put a lot of, at least the international community puts a lot of the burden on the Congolese, and basically Congo is a state that's just coming out of a war. About a year ago, I was in this same city and in the UK Parliament and was discussing exactly the same issue and good governance, and was basically trying to explain that, well, how can we expect this much from the Congolese, and how is it that we take so little action in our own countries? I mean, we have, export credits that, for instance, should be used to reward good behavior in the companies. National countries should loan to good companies that have good behavior, and stock exchanges should look into the ethical behavior of the different companies that are listed with them. Some stock exchanges, such as in Australia, do a very good job at that. There is people that are on the sanctions list, for instance, the UN sanctions list, but also individuals that are known to be in broad daylight commanders of rebel groups or executive secretaries of rebel groups that are living in our countries. No action is being taken. So there is a lot that we can do. We're speaking about embargo, but how about an investment strategy of de-investing or from companies that are known for bad behavior, or investing in countries that are, and this is very important, investing in companies that have good behavior, because good behavior is a better system of rewarding people. You should give them an incentive of having good behavior. There's a lot of things we can do, and you guys are, as journalists, are the movers and shakers here, and it's really up to us here. I mean, what has been possible on Darfur, why shouldn't it be possible on Congo, which has many more deaths? So there's a lot of things we can do, and it's a shame that we are not doing it. We should all be ashamed of each other and actually do it. Stop talking about it, act.
Alois, are you still with us? Are you still listening?
Yes, yes.
Could you? I want to give you the last word. What can we do?
First of all, before I say what you can do, I would like to say a few words on this Congolese consumption. I think that they have.
All right. Please make it quick.
It is important that as Congolese, we really stop this kind of fabulation around conspiracy theory. Everything which is happening badly on the Congolese is from outsiders, etc., etc. If we go on like that, really we will never be able to do our own part in what is not going on locally, in what is not going on in the country. Look at this renegotiation of contracts. Why did they delay it until the post-electoral time? Because most of these people who are now in the government, whether they were coming from rebellion groups or government groups, they're all involved in this kind of shady dealings. So these are not outsiders, these are inside people. So really, let's stop this kind of conspiracy theory and try to find out who are the book emissaries of our faith, and see what ourselves also, our own responsibility is in what's not going on in this country. And I think that's really what I would like to say. It is high time we stop looking for book emissaries for our own faith and for our own poverty and misery, etc. It is high time also we can focus on our own responsibility.
Okay, that's a wonderful thing. You're going to be master of your own ship. I think that's a wonderful way to end. But we here should not, therefore, just abandon any responsibility at all. We too must play our part in supporting that. And I'd like to thank our speakers, Tricia Feeney and Katie Clement, and our experts, Lizzie and Lydia, and all of you for coming tonight. Thank you very, very much indeed. Thank you.